Well, thank you, Daniel. We have a great opportunity here in our last few minutes together to hear a little bit from the two works that we are supporting here at Cornerstone to launch our missions effort, one domestic and one abroad, as you will hear, international. Just as you think about Cornerstone, what you're about to hear about, in a moment, our brother, Pastor Omri Miles, is going to come up and just share for a few minutes from the Word, and then he's going to give us an update on the work that he is going to plant a church in New Orleans East. He'll tell you about that. But you may not realize this, but when we launched, there was a church of a friend of mine named Paul Shirley in Wilmington, Delaware, and their church supported us for the first year as we were kind of getting our feet under us. They prayed for us. They financially supported us. He was a great help and a friend to me. In a variety of ways, they got behind our launch. There was another church, North Lake Bible Church, up in Dallas that built this pulpit for us, helped us with portable church. They also got behind us. So when you're church planting, if some other churches can partner with you to help you launch, it's really invaluable. And so Omri is going to plant. And so initially, as Pastor Omri and I have talked, we want to get behind helping them launch. And that may look like us sending some teams if they need out there to help them with stuff, helping them with their portable church. They're going to be meeting it as a school, and you'll hear. So you're going to get to hear about that. So Cornerstone is both financially, prayer, and just as think of a wave of movement, trying to help whatever needs they have, kind of like we heard from Pastor Scott. You know, we want to be zealous that the stocks are full, the shelves are full when people we're supporting need help. And then you'll hear from our brother Scott again about Papua New Guinea. So let's give a warm Cornerstone welcome to Omri Miles, church planter to New Orleans East. I love this brother. We've been friends for a long time and went to seminary a bit together. So, brother, tell us about the work.
Thank you. And thank you, Cornerstone Bible Church. You guys have been such an encouragement, not just as Scott mentioned, just the news of what God is doing here is enough to give any church planter hope and encouragement. And not that every work is going to look the same, but just super excited hearing about the different stories about how people find this church and clearly God leading people where his word is being preached. And so just the news has been an encouragement, but then to have you guys get behind us corporately, financially, and your prayers. I mean, so many people have been already praying for us. I've gotten emails and texts, people just thinking about New Orleans and excited to see what God might do as the word is opened and preached there. And so thank you for your encouragement. I just want to share a few updates, and I want to just start by reading from 1 Timothy chapter 3. Dr. Doran mentioned this passage in his last sermon. But in 1 Timothy 3, as I think about going to a dark place, New Orleans, and really an unwanted area of the city, New Orleans East is where I grew up, and I left for college in 2004. 2004, Hurricane Katrina decimated the city, and really New Orleans East has been the last portion of the city to be given attention, to be rebuilt. It still hasn't recovered in its population, the businesses that are there, and just looks like it hasn't recovered really from Hurricane Katrina in 2005. And when I think about going to a place like that, here is my hope as we endeavor to make God's name famous. Paul, writing to Timothy, tells us really why he's writing. And so he says in chapter 3, starting in verse 14, I am writing these things to you, hoping to come to you soon. But in case I am delayed, I write so that you will know how one ought to conduct himself in the household of God, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and support of the truth. And so Paul, just couched in his own articulation for why he's writing this letter to First Timothy, tells us what the church is, what the church is supposed to be doing. The church, he says in verse 15, is the church of the living God, but it's the household of God. This is God's family. God's family. You, Cornerstone Bible Church, are a family of God. All of you who believe by adoption have been brought into God's family so that you are all now sons of God, no longer sons of God's wrath or children of the devil, but now God's sons, graciously made so by adoption, right? This is what the church is, and it is the church of the living God, of the living God. So distinct from every other entity in Katy, in Texas, in the world. We have this church, soon a church in New Orleans, that will represent God and prove to the world by what Paul says here, the conduct of the various members of God's household. This is why each member, each group gets addressed in 1 Timothy in some way, shape, or form, because the conduct of the members of God's household matters. Just like you parents, you send your children to school or you send them off somewhere, they represent the family name, right? It's the same. When you go about Christian in your daily business, you're at work, at school, in your neighborhood, you're a representative of the living God. So by your conduct, you prove that the one you claim to serve, the one you profess, is in fact the one true living God. So as the conduct of the church goes, so goes God's reputation. So it's important how we conduct ourselves. We're representing him before the world. And then what are we doing as these representatives, as these members of God's household? Functioning as, verse 15 ends, the pillar and support of the truth. The pillar and support of the truth. We are the ones holding forth God's truth in an unbelieving world. What a tall task. Who is sufficient? Who is adequate for these things? Not me, not Darren, none of us, not any one of us, and not all of us all together. Dependent on God's grace to be these things, to just, if we could, maybe for a lifetime, strive to be faithful in representing God to the world and upholding his truth faithfully. That's what we're doing. And when I think about all of the things that come with laboring in New Orleans soon, to just fix my heart on these realities, there are more details than I care to count that have gotten us here and that are coming. As you move around from place to place and trying to figure out how do we just make a suitable place to gather on Sundays and make sure that during the week, between Sundays, people are continuing to grow, edified, the body's doing what the body's doing. So many details. God's overseeing all of that. Our job is really simple. Conduct yourself in such a way that God's character and God's truth are represented well. All of the details really do boil down to that. And so that's what we're laboring to do in New Orleans. Just a few updates. Last time I was here, I was planning, I preached during your equipping hour on Sunday morning, and then what I had mentioned to you, we had 5 families prepared to go out to New Orleans from Tempe and relocate. Shortly after I left here, the number dwindled, and now we have 3 families total, including mine, ready to leave. God gave greater clarity to a couple of those households, and so we've got 3 families, 7 adults, 13 children, relocating from Tempe to New Orleans. And I should have a couple slides, if we could just get the slides up. So name of the church will be Grace Bible Church, Grace Bible Church NOLA. Actually, Mick's brother designed our logo. What you're looking at is a bald cypress tree rooted in a Bible. And so the bald cypress tree is actually the state tree of Louisiana. It is slow growing, long lasting, and the bark withstands the inclement weather of the Louisiana swamps. And so that kind of captures what we want to be. We're prepared for slow growth over the long haul. We want to be long lasting and being able to endure the culture that's there. And we're going to do that by being rooted firmly in God's word. And so that's what that is. This is my family on the next slide. Recent pictures that we took. So I've got 5 children. I've been married to my wife for 11 and a half years. My oldest child, Chloe, on the left there, she's 9. Obadiah, who's 8, is in front of me. My the next two, Ezekiel and Jonah. Jonah's 5. Ezekiel is 4. They're exactly 12 months apart. And then Nashan, I'm holding him. He's our 2-year-old. And so as you can imagine, for me, this is different because I'm going back home. I'm originally from New Orleans. And so I'm taking everybody else who all they know is Arizona. And my wife has basically lived within a 15-mile radius her whole life. And so taking all 5 grandchildren from my in-laws, and that creates its own challenges, own hardship. And so that's one of the ways that you can be praying for us, is just as we leave for a new place, that we be able to get adjusted well and really just get established, set up ourselves and our home in New Orleans. This is our core team. The Robinson family on the left. That's Derek's mom standing next to me on my right. Judy Heddens came to live with Derek and their family. And so she's been in Arizona, I think, 3 years or so, 2 to 3 years now. And she's relocating with us. My family, and then the Dudleys, Nick and Brittany Dudley, on my left. And so these are the families that are going. We actually just purchased a home 5 doors down from the Robinsons, which was a sweet provision of the Lord. The Robinsons were the first family to commit to coming to New Orleans in 2009, as this was just really a dawning thought in my own mind to bring the gospel to New Orleans. The Robinsons thought, yeah, we'll do that. We'd love to relocate and be a part of something like that. And so they've kind of been a part of the almost 15-year journey to get there, all the equipping and training. And just as an aside, I had no idea. I had no thought in my mind of church planting when the Lord saved me. As I mentioned, I left in 2004 and went to college in Georgia. In 2008, God saved me through expositional preaching. It was the clearest I had ever heard the gospel presented. The articulation of God's wrath on Jesus as a substitute for sins that Jesus didn't commit. God just used that to turn the lights on for me. And I remember, just shortly, days before God saved me, as I'm hearing this and having my own life upended in the best way possible by the preaching I was hearing, I kept thinking, people are not hearing this in New Orleans. Oh, I've never heard this before. People need to hear this in New Orleans. 4 months later, I was in Tempe, Arizona at Grace Bible Church, hearing Scott Maxwell preach exposition week after week, hearing Smedley Yates articulate a biblical philosophy of missions. And so the pieces started to come together for me as I realized, New Orleans isn't missing just a guy who's excited to go preach God's word. It's missing a whole church. Missions is about church planting. And so realizing that, started to have the desire to actually go back and help establish a church there. So it's kind of amazing to think 15 years later, here we are, just from the initial seeds being planted when I was here in the gospel. This is where we're planting. This is a map of New Orleans, the entire city. You can see the Mississippi kind of winding through the city, and the Mississippi has always been, life kind of revolves around the river, and so that's why you see the cities kind of sprawled out close to the river, and that highlighted area is New Orleans East. There are some 90,000 or so souls in New Orleans East, with really not a church like this one or the one I attend. The things that you know and love about this church, meaningful membership, expository preaching, church discipline where you can speak into each other's lives and be brought back and restored from your sin. Those kinds of things, shepherding that depends on and loves the sufficiency of Scripture. There's not a place in New Orleans East where that's happening. And so really with the convictions that we have going into the city, we will be kind of one of a kind, unfortunately. We'll be one of a kind. And so that's why we're going there. Here, where we're meeting, is just such a kind providence of the Lord. One of the members of our core team, called every school in New Orleans East, various businesses, finding out if we could meet there. And really the only place to give us any serious engagement ended up being this school in New Orleans East, Abramson Psi Academy. That is the high school I graduated from. It's just an amazing turn of God's grace and providence. So we went and toured the school. There seems to be a wide open door for influence. I mean, to have male influence there is just, they kind of take anybody probably. And so I'm just shaking hands, meeting people, and they're introducing me, class of 04, Omri's back. And I'm meeting people, and people are asking me to get involved in teaching Bible studies, meeting with kids on campus, encouraging me to exchange information with some of the athletes on campus. And so there's just a wide open door for influence in the gospel. We're really excited about what you're looking at on the map is actually the distance between my house and the school. It's a 21-minute walk and a 4-minute drive from door to door. And so we're eager to see how God might use hospitality in ministering to people at the school, families at the school, staff, faculty, and all the rest. Darren mentioned the pulpit. Last time I was here, said that you guys were buying a pulpit for us. That's it. That's the top. That is this piece of the pulpit. So thank you guys for your generosity. We drove out a U-Haul truck recently to take our stuff out of storage in Arizona, bring it to our home in New Orleans, and we dropped everything off. This was the first thing to come out of the truck. I was the most excited about this of everything else that was in there. We can sleep on the floor, but this, such a beautiful piece of furniture. Randy Buster, who we picked it up from in Dallas on our way to New Orleans, hosted us as we drove out and showed me how to put it together, and the whole thing. On top of this is engraved Keruxan Tan Lagan, preach the word in Greek, and it's from 2 Timothy 4. And so that's your gift to us, and I can't wait to preach from it. Super excited about that. We as I mentioned, are going to meet for the first time November 12th in just a few weeks. Actually, I'm not going to stick around much longer than this. I've got to get back to the airport, fly back to Arizona tonight. Tomorrow is send-off Sunday at our church. And so our church is going to just entrust us to God's grace as they send us out. It'll be our last week with the congregation we know and love. And then Monday morning, we're driving away from Arizona. And so it's been a whirlwind just getting to this point. We've been running really hard at 1,000,000 miles an hour, it's felt like, having lots of lasts, last dinner with this family, last meeting here, preached my last couple sermons and last series recently in Haggai in the past several weeks. And so what we're going to do when we get to New Orleans is meet on November 12th. We're going to celebrate God's grace in bringing us to this point. We're going to take about 7 weeks. We're not going to meet and just get established in the city. It'll be good, especially for my wife and me, to just get our family settled in New Orleans, get acclimated, and then on the first Sunday in January, on January 7th, we'll begin our permanent meetings. And in between then, we'll be fellowshipping with another local church, actually what they call the North Shore Lake Pontchartrain. There's a guy who's very like-minded in the TMS doctoral program currently, and we have gotten to know each other over the past year and a half, become good friends with the saints at that church. So we'll be fellowshipping with them for a few years, and then we'll launch ourselves permanently at the beginning of the year. Some ways you can be praying is, as I mentioned, for the core teams to just get settled in the city as we catch our breath and organize, unpack our homes and kind of orient to life there. Just pray that we would be well rested during that time. Pray that the various details that need to come together for a Sunday morning gathering, that those details would come together. And pray for the hearts of the people that are there. I just got an email actually during breakfast this morning from someone looking for a church in New Orleans. So just from time to time over the past several weeks, I get an email or a phone call or somebody telling me, hey, people are waiting for you to come. So who knows how all of those things come together, but you can just be praying that God would prepare the hearts as the word is coming, that people would be ready to receive it and really imbibe the preaching of God's word. So thank you again for your support. We look forward to just the close relationship that we have. We can't drive to Phoenix, but we can drive to Katy. And so to have you guys close is really a sweet blessing to us. So thank you.
In Papua New Guinea today, there are hundreds of language groups without any access to the gospel. And when you look at the landscape, it's easy to see why. Papua New Guinea is one of the most rugged places on the planet. Steep mountains covered with dense jungle, fast-flowing rivers, earthquakes, landslides, volcanoes, not to mention animism, turning to witch doctors and sorcery. If someone doesn't go to this end of the earth, these people will remain unreached indefinitely. Fittest is about three things: the church, the missionary, and the glory of God. First, we honor the church's role in the Great Commission. The Great Commission belongs to the local church, not to sending ministries like Finisterre. Only the church can raise up qualified missionaries. The right kind of servants must be sent, and the church determines who they are. We are about the missionary. We uphold the church's missionaries. How do we do that? It begins with robust, effective training. And that's why we partner with Radius International. Their training ensures that missionaries have all they need to learn an unwritten language, to develop a literacy program, and then to preach the gospel and translate the Bible. And while in Papua New Guinea, we uphold those missionaries from our Finisterre field office in Madang, where we meet their logistical needs week in and week out. We are about the glory of God. We believe that these ends of the earth, the ones that are hard to get to, the ones without access to Scripture, these must be reached with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Why? Because the Lamb who was slain purchased for God with his blood people from every tongue, tribe, nation, and people, and he must get the full reward of his suffering. And because we remember what it was like to also have been lost in our sin, we needed to hear the gospel of God's grace in Jesus Christ. And because our King, who has all authority in heaven and on earth, he commanded us to go and make disciples of all the nations. The ends of the earth must be reached because Jesus Christ is worthy. He must get the glory he is due. Learning an unwritten language, preaching the gospel, translating the Bible, plotting faithfully in church planting, all for Jesus' sake. That's a very big task. But it can be done. In fact, it must be done. And we can do it together. Every time I see that, every time I think about those things, my throat fills up. Because those people are precious and they have no access to the gospel. And it's a great privilege for us to be able to participate together in the Great Commission, whether it's in New Orleans, right here in Katy, or at the ends of the earth. Brian Twombly spent some time with your men one morning, is that correct? Yeah. And he is from Community Baptist Church in Stuart, Florida, just a little bit further north of GIBC. And he took many, many classes, basically almost all of the MDiv with TES. And we trained him, and they got trained through TES. And then we spent some time with us last year out in Phoenix. He and his wife, Kara, and 3 kids, Uriah, Sadie, and PJ. And they were launched to our field office in the spring and have been trained there for the last 6 months. And they have, he's our field director and will be the one running the base in Papua New Guinea. And we asked him if he would put together a video just so you can see his life and his ministry and what they've been doing in their language learning. And so he's not going to be in an unreached tribe like you saw many of those pictures, but he's right on the coast. And we send him into a village, he and his wife and family, every couple of days, and just drop him off in this village. And they learn the trade language that's called Talk Pidgin. And nobody speaks any English there. And this is how we're helping them learn how to become accustomed to language and culture there. And I want you to see his video that he made specially for you. That just explains what his life and his ministry looks like so far. So why don't we watch that?
Greetings from the Twombly family. My name is Brian Twombly and my wife's name is Kara. We have 3 kiddos. Our youngest is Penelope June, or PJ, she's 4. And then we have Sadie Ray, she's 6 years old. And then our oldest is Uriah Judd, and he is 7 years old. This past May, our family moved from South Florida to Papua New Guinea, specifically a town called Madang, which is a port city on the northern coast of the country. Here's a picture of where our home sits, and here's a flyover of the base where we live. As you can see, there's two larger buildings. One of them, the longer one, is 3 individual flats. And then under is a carport and another area where there's some more housing. And then the big square house, which is the house that we live in, also attached to that is a pretty well-stocked workshop. The other buildings would be for storage, and you can see we have a couple large water containers. All in all, just a sweet place to live. Finisterre has been renting this place for a number of years from SIL, or Summer Institute of Linguistics, and we are so grateful that we get to live here. Next, I'm going to take you on a little tour from our house into town proper. We have a market, gas stations, hardware stores, and grocery stores. We have public motor vehicles, or PMVs, always driving or boating around. The range of people living in Madang is pretty diverse. There are some who have enough money to have a house, a car, and electricity, and then there are lots who live in villages on the outskirts of town in houses made of bamboo posts and bamboo walls and a metal roof with no electricity. Generally, the people here are sweet, they're kind and welcoming, and they're so grateful that we moved here and that we want to learn their language and all of their customs and even help out the church. If you smile at them, they will typically smile back with a bigger smile than yours. Now, thinking about ministry, typically when people consider ministry in Madang, they think of people going to remote places, learning a tribal language, and doing ministry in that context. And this is very much the focus of Finisterre, our missions organization. But upon our joining and coming to Madang, we are planning to begin a new arm of ministry. We are in a town where there are some churches, and we know of one where there is sometimes a clear gospel preached. But there's much work to do here. Things like a clear ecclesiology, discipleship, training of men, and shepherding are all things that are seemingly absent in the churches we've been able to visit and in the reports from the people that we've been able to interact with. In Madang, we are hoping to see a strong, faithful church established, either through planting a new one or helping strengthen an existing one. On top of that, we are planning to translate resources into Tok Pisin and establish some form of pastoral training for men. All of this is something that is new for Finisterre, and therefore we're needing time and wisdom to determine what is the best route for how ministry should look. As we are learning language, we are keeping tabs and making as many ministry observations as possible, so that when we are at a place to be able to start ministry, we have some clarity as to what we may aim to do, whether it will be planting a church or helping to strengthen an existing one, as well as what pastoral training might look like. Our days right now are pretty consistent. Kara spends the mornings homeschooling, and I work on admin, base, or home items. And then our afternoons are spent largely learning language. And this can be reading books, transcribing recorded conversations, chatting with our neighbors, or anyone willing to sit down and story with us. Kara has been spending time with our neighbor, and I have been walking down to the end of the street and chatting with a handful of guys who work in a guardhouse. We also have a language helper who comes to our house each Friday. Another thing that we have done is, as a family, we go sit with a husband and wife at the market and get to watch and help them at their table selling produce. Thank you for checking out our family. We are loving it here. There are hard days like anywhere, but overall it has been great. As we end, here are a couple prayer requests for our family. First, that we would be faithful. Next, that our kiddos would continue to do well in adjusting and learning. You can pray for our relationships in Madang. You can pray for our dependence to be in the right place, on God and not ourselves. You can pray for our brains, that they would be strong in learning as much as possible. Pray for humility as we learn all of the new things. Pray for more missionaries to come. There is much work to be done in Madang and in the Finisterre Mountains. And then lastly, you can pray for patience in all things.
That's a great family. Brian is the right man to have in place over there. And he is, I just want to underscore what he said. We have that field office there, and originally all we were doing out of the field office is we were just doing logistics supplies for the tribal teams that were in. That was the only thing we did. And what we decided to do is, well, we actually love the local church. So even where our base is, we want to make sure that we're engaged where the local church is. And the local church is so weak throughout that town of Madang that we decided what we need to do is we need to tether our ministry, even our field office, to the local church in Madang. And so one of the things that Brian's primary role will be is to kind of survey the strength of the churches there, and that maybe there might be one that would like us to come in and be a part of it and help strengthen it pastorally, and with discipleship and good counseling materials. And if that doesn't work, then we'll plant our own church, Lord willing, because we want the local church to be tethered, or us to be tethered to the local church. We want a strong connection. We're also going to be engaging in the translation of resources into that trade language. And this is where Rick Kress, who's a part of TMAI and he's a part of the church at Founders, he is on the cutting edge of translating materials into every possible language available out in the world. And I'm having lunch with him again on Monday because we just have important opportunities to put that trade language, give good resources into that trade language. 9 million people on the island, 7 million of them speak that trade language. And if they could have a good translation of their Bible in that language, and they could have a good study Bible like MacArthur's study Bible notes with that, that island could change very quickly. And then we want to do pastoral training eventually, and that's going to take a church to be mature, and it's going to take time, and Brian's going to help get that started so that we can eventually have a church-based seminary kind of pastoral-like training right out of our base there, so that we can train the men of the local churches in Madang so that they can then push in from the coast and go back to their tribes and their clans. And we want to see that island really be confronted with the gospel and a solid ecclesiology in every possible way that we can. So we have high hopes, and we have a very tall order in front of us, and we need more people to join us in that. So there's a sign-up sheet in the back on you giving your life away to Finisterre, and you can do that for the low, low price of a dime. So we'll take you. What I would like to do is, for the next 3 hours, show you some more slides. Just kidding. For the next just brief bit of time, I do want to show you just a little bit about Finisterre so you can see even just a little bit more. So that's who we are. We're all about a mission to the ends of the earth. We work only in one mountain chain in Papua New Guinea. We are not over the whole island. We are only in one mountain chain where there are still about 50 unreached language groups that have no access to their language in writing. They have no access to the Bible, and therefore they are missing out on the truth. We can go to the next one. Finisterre is two Latin words put together that mean the ends of the earth, which is really nice because that's what Acts 1:8 says, that we want to take the gospel and be witnesses of Jesus Christ from Jerusalem to Judea and Samaria and even to the remotest or the ends of the earth. And we're a missionary sending ministry that really just wants to help the local church send its missionaries to Papua New Guinea to plant churches there. And that's where Papua New Guinea is, if you don't know where it's at. Interestingly, Papua New Guinea was established as its own independent government and country in 1975. And there are over 800 different language groups on that island. Can you imagine trying, and many of those, 300 of those language groups don't have their language written. They are in mountainous regions like this where they can't get to one another. Can you imagine one government trying to unite all of those people to agree on the same form of government? Papua New Guinea is a hot mess. They just recently, Brian sent me video. It's that time of year where they do elections, and they got a new president, and mobs form after the elections, and the police chase them down the street with guns, and they're hacking each other with machetes, and Brian is standing at the window videoing the whole thing for me. And I'm like, you should probably duck and take cover because I can hear gunshots. But that's Brian. He likes to be where the action is. So here's one of the villages that we are in, or the village we are in Papua New Guinea. You can see the mountains are covered with jungle. They're so steep that you cannot live on the sides, so that the language groups in the villages, they build on the ridges of the mountain. That's about 3,500 feet above sea level. To get there from the coast, you have to hike up 4,500 feet back down to 2,200 feet, and then back up to 3,500 feet, which is why we like to use helicopters to get in and out. Why are we in Papua New Guinea? We're in Papua New Guinea because it is a very rugged place, and the last unreached language groups of the world are last for a reason. They're last because they're the most difficult ones to get to. These people, this is not on the way to anywhere, and it is nobody's final destination that they're thinking of. It's a rugged place. It holds over 10% of the world's languages. Papua New Guinea does. It's difficult to get there. It's difficult to say, or as I like to say, it's hard to get there. It's easy to leave because it's so difficult. And one of the reasons we're there is you can write on your visa application, Missionary Church Planter. It's not a closed access or restricted access country. You can put, that's your job, and they'll take you, and they want you. And it is dominated by animism. They worship their ancestors. They believe there are demons in rocks, and they have to sacrifice pigs to them to appease the demons. There's crazy stories. And they will take Jesus. If you are not clear about who Jesus Christ is, they will put him on the shelf right alongside all of their ancestors. And you think that they're embracing Jesus, but they have not repented of anything that they lived for and were bound by and slaves to before. So it just takes so much work there with these dear people. Let's go to the next one. Here's just some pictures. The top left picture is a riverbed that is not flowing with water, but when it does rain, it will be a raging river and dangerous. Down on the bottom left is one of our missionaries crossing a bamboo bridge to get across a raging river. If you fall in that river, they'll never find you. And you can see on the top right, a side picture there is just landslides where the rock will just come down and take out anything and everyone below it. Next one. Did we skip one? Is that the next one? All right, great. I'm looking at something different. That's fine. 9 million people on the island. Papua New Guinea is the size of California geographically. But to give you a sense of population, California has about 38 million people. But there's 9 million people on the island. There are 830 different language groups. And that's over just around 10%, a little bit more than 10% of the languages in the world in that tiny little spot the size of California. And it's because all of those language groups are separated from one another and they don't go anywhere else. And they're isolated, they're excluded from the rest. And there's 300 language groups on the island, the entire nation, without access to Scripture. Before you go on, the two structures on the right were our missionary homes that were there, and an earthquake a year ago brought both of those down, and they're not there anymore. And we're in the process of rebuilding them. All right, let's do the next one. Here's just some pictures of the folks that you'll see. This woman on the left is a widow. She has been abandoned by her adult children. They have no interest in their mother, and they don't want to take care of her. And so our missionary family that's there, she loves them, and every time they leave and leave the village to go on furlough or whatever, she just cries because they're leaving. On the bottom right is a different village, not ours, but you can see how young the kids are. It's a very young country. Lots of kids taken care of by other kids. It's babies having babies is basically what's going on. Let's take a look at the next one. And we want to go to them, right? Romans 10, how then will they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how are they to believe in him whom they've never heard? And how are they going to hear without someone preaching? And how are they to preach unless we send? And that's our job, to send beautiful feet. Helicopter access is really the only way in, and that's how we have to get in all of the building supplies. So imagine a house being built, and they bring everything to your property to build the house in a helicopter, slinging it, putting 4x8 sheets of plywood inside, whatever they can do to get them there. That's the village on the bottom right there, and the helicopter on the pad. Let's do the next one. Two different tribal celebrations. I'll tell you the story on the one on the right. I was sharing it with a couple here earlier at lunch. This is a 2-day hike. All the kids and all the people on the right, it's a village that's a 2-day hike from the village we're in. And people from that village came to us and said, came to our missionary in the tribe and said, please come, we're having a communal repentance. So they're in dust and ashes right now. And they know that as a village, they are in trouble. They've had violence that's breaking out between them, and they know something's not right. And so what they're doing is they're trying to have this communal repentance. They believe there's a curse on them, and that's why the violence is happening. And the reason they think there's a curse on them is because probably less than 2 generations ago, they ate their missionaries. Now, they're not cannibals anymore, but we're talking like World War II, post-World War II, like some of our grandparents would have been like missionaries' ages going, and they would have come up against cannibals. And so our missionary was invited to come down, and they invited some other Lutheran pastors, and I use both of those words loosely. And they wanted all of the religious men in the area to come down to this village. And so my missionary said, that, from our church back home, said, I'll go, but only if it's understood that I'm observing and I'm not a part of what you're going to do, because he didn't know what he was walking into. So he walked down, and that village had taken an offering of 1,000 kina. That's their dollars, not a lot of money. And everything for them is transactional. So if there's a curse on them, if we give the religious people in our mountains this money, then that'll lift the curse, right? And that's what they were thinking. And so they're all sitting in a hut, and they start divvying up the money, and they're pushing it out to the different pastors and religious people. And they pushed it towards our missionary, and he pushed it right back at them and said, I won't take it because you have no idea what curse is on you. And it has not been lifted, and it can only be lifted one way. This is a 2-day hike from where we are, and there are no missionaries going to these people. That's not acceptable. Knowing what we know about the Great Commission, and it's hard to get there, and it's going to take a lot of resources to get there. For every missionary that's in a place like this, can you imagine the number of supporters behind them in a line, like a helicopter pilot, like a helicopter mechanic, like a base where you hold that helicopter, just the number of people behind that, and the dollars and the support and the prayer and the training that needs to go so that the mechanics don't give up, because it's hard for them to live there too. So, but if we don't tackle that, these people perish in their sins. And you and I have to, what we're hearing this weekend, we have to say that's not acceptable. It's just not an option. We have to go. We have to do something. And we can. Let's go to the next one. So what do we do when we get there? Well, the first thing we do is we learn the language and the culture. We develop a written alphabet for them. There's training that does that. There's people that actually know how to do this kind of stuff, where they can give you an international alphabet, and you can make up, if there's a sound that's strange, that's not like in our English, there's little letters you can make up for that stuff, and people give them a written language. We translate the scripture into their language. We teach through the Bible chronologically. We teach a lesson lessons from Genesis to Revelation to give them the big sweep of the Bible. And here's our missionary. This is Zach. And he's explaining to them, they just finished house building, and he's telling them again, this is why we're here. And he's just running through these kinds of things. And we're going to raise up indigenous pastors, and then we're going to go home. And this is your church. And this is what they do. That will take right there, those bullet points will take about 15 years, maybe more. Let's do the next one. And here they are. On the left, these are some of the kids and the wives, and they're doing the chronological teaching of the Bible and are showing pictures to tell stories. They have no idea what a lamb is. There's no lambs in the mountain. And so there's pictures of things that you have to be able to show them. This gal, I'm sorry, I'm walking over here, so if you're looking over there, I'm sorry. This gal right here, I want to tell you about her. Are there any single women here who have ever given thought to missions? Like something like this. Okay, if you're raising your heart, again, that's okay, you can do that. The Lord sees that. That's Amelia. And Amelia's from South Africa. And she joined our team and when they went in, and guess who learned the language of the Doe people the best? It was her. And do you know why? Because our missionary moms and dads had to go home at the end of the day and take care of their kids. And she stayed out with the women in the village and just kept sitting and talking while they were sewing their bags or while they were getting food ready for their families. And she just kept sitting and listening and talking, and she learned the Doe language the best. There are 3 people in the world outside of that tribe who know that language, and she's one of them. And then she went home on furlough, and she did something crazy. She got married. And she didn't even ask me if I was okay with that. And I was okay with it. But she now is back home in South Africa, and she is doing translation work for us. And she's translating the Old Testament passages that our missionary Zach wants translated. And it's amazing. You upload that to the cloud, and Zach from Papua New Guinea gets into the cloud and pulls that translation out, and she's one of the most profitable missionaries we have. On the top right, Zach is teaching the gospel using a chalkboard. Bottom right is one of our missionary moms sitting on the ground, and she's doing language learning with the kids. You can do that with kids. You can say, what do you call this? Pick some of the grass. What do you call this? And they tell you the word, and you write it down, and you listen carefully, and you try to, it's just a long process. It's about a 3 to 4 year process of learning the language in the culture, so that you understand it well enough that when you say God to them, you know what they mean when you hear that. Okay, let's do the next one. How do we do it? I want you to notice I'm a pastor. I've been pastoring for a long time, and I can't help but as a pastor think about the church. And so the very first thing that I wanted to be able to communicate about who we are is the church. How do we do this? Well, it begins with the church. The church first raises up qualified missionaries and authorizes them to plant more churches. That's where missions begins. Not with me, but with the church. But because we're going to a part of the world that is so unique, there's no written language there. How on earth do you do that? Well, you've got to go get unique training for that in the middle there. The church's missionary must receive the best training for long-term church planting in unreached language groups. And in the video I mentioned Radius International. They are a training ministry only. They don't send, but all they do is they train. And they train students for 9 to 10 months of the year on how to do the very thing that we've been talking about, where you need to learn the language or give them an alphabet, learn it, teach them to read it, and so forth. When somebody has done those 2 things, when a church has a qualified, authorized church planter ready to go, they've gotten the training for an unreached language group, that's when I want to jump in. I'm last. I'm third. I don't want to be first. I want to be third, because then finally we can help you as a church send your missionaries and help them to persevere and last 15 years. That's the idea of what we are and how we do what we do. Let's do the next one. Our Madang field office, Brian already walked through this. Our missionaries, if you ever were to raise up a missionary team and they were going to go into the tribe where we're up in the mountains, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to go to our field office in Madang down on the coast. They're going to spend 6 to 9 months with us, and they're going to learn the trade language that just about everybody speaks. We're going to help you do surveys of tribes during that time. We'll helicopter you up into the mountains, and you'll be able to hike and look at some of the different villages and see which ones might want to invite you to come in to them. Also at our field office, we do the logistical support for the rural teams. So every 6 weeks, a supply will come up from a helicopter. If a missionary kid, for example, no names, is on a bike on the top of a mountain and runs into a tree and breaks his jaw and needs an emergency helicopter ride out, that's what we do. We provide those. That actually happened. I don't know how a bike got up to the top of the mountains, but they took one. We provide some pastoral care there for them in that at our base. We're going to do church-based pastoral training in the town of Madang and do church planting and strengthening there, and just do a lot of translation of materials. I tell you, that island is desperately in need of solid biblical resources for the church and its mission, and we want to supply that for them. Let's do the next one. That's a picture from our base. So you stand at the back of our base and look over the ocean there, that bay, and those mountains in the background. Those are the mountains that our missionaries are in. Revelation 5, someday in the future, there's going to be a whole chorus of people around the throne saying, "Worthy are you to take the scroll, to open its seals, because you were slain and you purchased by your blood, you ransomed people for God from every tribe, language, tongue, and people." And we want to be a part of that happening, right? Let's do the next one. There's some of our information. And then I just got a few pictures at the end here. Let's just kind of look through these. I just want you to see the people. I want you to see the souls of these people. And again, you got lots of kids, lots of young ones who are growing up. Look at all those kids in the top left. That's in our village. I'll see if I can find this stat real quick, because this is actually just really staggering. Here it is. I just want you to listen to this. 31% of the people in Papua New Guinea are under the age of 15. A third of the population. 60% are under the population is under the age of 30. So they have a very high birth rate that begins early, and they have a low, what's the other one? Not your death rate, but your mortality rate is lower also. So it's just a young people. The babies are being cared for by the 5-year-olds and the 7-year-olds while mom is getting food ready and dad is out hunting. Our missionaries, this is one of the challenges with our missionaries. When your boys are, if you got missionary, you're a missionary and your kids, your boys are 10 years old and you go home on furlough, you come back and your kid's 11, and all of a sudden all of their friends are no longer in the village because they're out hunting all the time. And so one of the challenges that a missionary family faces is that as the kids get older, they're increasingly isolated. The missionaries' girls that grow up find out, oh, I can't play with her anymore because she just got married. She's 13. And so this is one of the challenges, and this is what we must think about before we ever send. You've got to count the cost of these kinds of things. What are you going to do? Because there's going to be things like that are going to happen over and over and over. And we have to be willing to pay the price, I think, for those things. And if that's it, I think that's it. All right.